Hey guys, this is the SAT math guy. I've aggregated the 15 hardest SAT math questions that I have found on my channel. As many of you may know, I have a video for every single SAT math question on my YouTube channel. I know that it's been of huge value to so many students, and I super appreciate all the support that you all have given me over the years. But this video is different from most of the videos on my channel. Typically, I just make a video per question so that you can focus all of your energy on why did you miss that question? How can you not miss questions like that in the future? What is the strategy that goes along with that question? What's the math concept maybe also that goes along with that question? This video is different because I have now aggregated what I believe are the 15 hardest SAT math questions in existence, right? The 15 hardest SAT math questions ever. So watch the video from beginning to end. See how maybe if any of these video or any of these questions relate to each other. Is there any psychology that relates them? Is there any pattern that you recognize? Pay close attention to that. Pause the video as soon as I introduce the question. See if you're able to answer it yourself. Then press play again and see how I approached it. And then take notes, right? Like, what do you learn? Even if we get to the same answer, was there some process that I use that's more efficient, maybe, than what you use? Or maybe you have a process that's more efficient than mine. If you do, please make a comment on the video so we can all learn from your strategies. Anyway, I've talked too much. Let's jump straight into this video, and I look forward to seeing your comments soon.
So this question says, or starts off by saying that C is equal to 5/9 F minus 32. So this might be a familiar formula to you that you've already learned in school about converting between Celsius and Fahrenheit. It goes on to say the equation above shows how a temperature Fahrenheit or temperature F measured in degrees Fahrenheit relates to a temperature C measured in degrees Celsius. Based on the equation, which of the following must be true? So again, I like to always write down equations that are provided because I may need to manipulate them in some way. So might as well just get started and write that down. So it looks like this just jumps straight into a process of elimination type of question. We're not really given anything additional outside of the formula itself. So I have to basically test every answer choice to see what works and what doesn't. So choice one says a temperature increase of 1 degree Fahrenheit is equivalent to a temperature increase of 5/9 degrees Celsius. Well, let's see. How do I test that? Well, I can use kind of a plug in your own number method here, in which case, right, a temperature increase of 1 degree Fahrenheit. Well, let's say originally my Fahrenheit was, and let's make this so I don't have a negative number in here. Let's say my Fahrenheit degree measurement was 33. So what would happen if F were 33? So if F were 33, I'd have C equals 5/9, right? 33 minus 32, which is just 5/9 times 1, which of course is just 5/9. Now I increase that by 1. Now I have F equals 34. What happens then? Well, that becomes C equals 5/9. 34 minus 32, which becomes 5/9 times 2, which is, I'll call it 10/9. So the question was, or the answer choice says, is equivalent to a temperature increase of 5/9. Well, yeah, right? So 5/9 increased by 5/9, right? Or kind of plus 5/9 does in fact equal 10/9, right? So when I increase my degree, my Fahrenheit number by 1, right? So a plus 1, I got a plus 5/9 on the C. So I like 1. And for that reason, I immediately get rid of B and C because answer choice 1 is not an option there. So let's look at 2, right? So again, I can cross this out as well because all I have left is A and D, and 3 is not an option there. So let's see option 2. So option 2 says a temperature increase of 1 degree Celsius is equivalent to a temperature increase of 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, let's try that. So again, I'm going to use the exact same plug in your own number method. And I'm going to say, well, if initially C was equal to, I don't know, let's say 100. So if C were 100, what would happen? I'd have 100 equals 5/9 F minus 32. And then, of course, I'm trying to get f by itself, so I would multiply both sides by 9/5 because I want this 5 and 5 and 9 and 9 to cross out here. But then on this side, I can treat this like 100 over 1. 5 goes into 5 once. 5 goes into 120 times. So I'm left with a 9 times 20. So I'd have 180 is equal to f minus 32. I can add 32 to both sides. And, sorry, I'm left with f equals 212. Okay, so that's the original. So now if I increase that by 1, so let's see what happens when c equals 101. I can do the exact same math, so I'd have 101 is equal to 5/9 f minus 32. Again, the exact same process again, which is 9/5 being multiplied on both sides. Again, the 9/5 crosses out on the right-hand side, leaving me with f minus 32. And then I have a little bit more work to do on this side, but 101 times 9 is 909. So I'd have 909 over 5. I then add 32 to both sides. I have a little bit more work to do now. I have 909 over 5 plus 32 over 1 is equal to f. But in order to combine those fractions, I need to have the lowest common denominator. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 5. 32 times 5, because we don't have a calculator, I just want to show you nothing wrong with writing it off on the side. 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. So now I'd have 909 over 5 plus 160 over 5, which is equal to, again, 909 plus 160. So I'd have 1,069 over 5 will be my new Fahrenheit temperature versus the 212 that I had initially here. And the question is it an increase of 1.8? Well, I can divide 5 into 1,069, and let's see what I get as a decimal. So 5 into 1,069, well, that's 2. So 10, 0, bring down the 6. That's 1. That'd be 5. 6 minus 5 is 1. Bring down the 9. And then 5 into 19 is 3, which is 15. The difference there is 4. 4 doesn't go in, so I put a decimal point. I'd have to add a 0. Bring down that 0, it's 40. 5 into 40 is 8, so I have 213.8. And yes, what do you know, right? 212 was what I got when C is 100. 213.8 degrees is what I get when C is 101. And yes, that is an increase of 1.8 degrees. So 2 was also correct, meaning that choice D is the best answer here. Okay, so this question says the equation 24x squared plus 25x minus 47 divided by ax minus 2 is equal to negative 8x minus 3 minus 53 over ax minus 2 is true for all values of x does not equal to a, where a is a constant. What is the value of a? So I like these questions because realistically, it's all about understanding this equal sign in the middle. So if it is true that 24x squared plus 25x minus 47 all over ax minus 2 is equal to negative 8x minus 3, and I'm going to say over 1 to make everything a fraction here, minus 53 over ax minus 2. Well, there's some simplifying that I can do here to try to make these two sides, right, the left side and the right side of the equal sign, to make them look equivalent. So how would I do that? Well, first of all, on the left side, I have a single fraction. On the right side, I have two separate fractions. So I'm going to combine the two fractions on the right-hand side. So how would I do that? Well, I need to have a common denominator. So that means that my negative 8x minus 3 over 1 needs to be multiplied by ax minus 2 over ax minus 2. And then I'd have my minus 53 over ax minus 2, right? Ax minus 2 is the common denominator for the right-hand side, or the lowest common denominator. So that means that my numerator here would become And I'll just write it this way: negative 8x minus 3, parentheses ax minus 2, and all that's over ax minus 2 minus 53 over ax minus 2. Now, since I have a common denominator, I can combine the two fractions together so that now I have negative 8x minus 3, ax minus 2 minus 53, all over ax minus 2. Again, that's going to be equal to my 24x squared plus 25x minus 47 all over ax minus 2. All right, well, now that I have the same denominator on both sides of the equal sign, right, and now I have a single fraction, well, if they're truly equal, then we should have a match for the numerator and the denominator. Well, I have ax minus 2 on both denominators, so that's taken care of. Those are already matched. They're already equal. So what I really need to do is figure out, well, how do I make the numerators equal to each other? So I'm going to go over here to this side of the board and say, well, how do I get 24x squared plus 25x minus 47 to equal negative 8x minus 3 times ax minus 2? Well, I need to simplify the right-hand side, so I'm going to do FOIL here. So multiply first time first. I get negative 8ax squared, and then multiply the two outers. I get positive 16x. Multiply the two inner terms. I get a negative 3ax. And multiply the two last terms, I get a positive 6. And again, that's all equal to my 24x squared plus 25x minus 47. So now I have some more matching to do. So if these are the only two terms that say x squared, and again, it's all based upon the fact that they must be equal to each other, that tells me that negative 8a must be equal to 24. Now, hopefully that makes sense. Again, there aren't any other x squared terms here. There aren't any other x squared terms here. And since they must be equal to each other, right? Again, the key being this equal sign in the middle. This negative 8a must be 24. If that's the case, right, which it is, I divide by negative 8, and a must equal negative 3, and therefore my answer is choice B.
So this question is a single line, so I'm thinking that it's probably going to be a simplify question, because again, simplify questions tend to show up in questions that are between 1 and 3 lines long. So let's read this question and see how we can simplify it. So if 3x minus y equals 12, what is the value of 8 to the x over 2 to the y? So what can I simplify here? So 3x minus y equals 12. I can't really simplify that. I mean, I could isolate y or I could isolate x if I wanted, but that really, I don't know whether I should do that or not. And also, looking at the answer choices, everything is a term to an exponent, which really points my attention here. So is there a way to simplify 8 to the x over 2 to the y? Well, actually, there is. So exponent rules tells me that if I'm dividing values that have the same base, I can subtract the exponents. So I don't have the same base here because the base of the top is 8, the base of the bottom is 2, but I can convert 8 into something that has a base with 2 because 8 is the same as 2 to the third power. So if I replace 8 with 2 to the third power, keep the x where it is, and I still have my 2 to the y on bottom, that would turn into 2 to the 3x, again, because exponent rules say if I have a power raised to another power, I multiply those two powers together. So I have 2 to the 3x over 2 to the y. And like I just mentioned before, anytime my bases are the same, I simply subtract the exponents and keep the base. So 2 to the 3x over 2 to the y will become 2 to the 3x minus y. And what do you know? 3x minus y is exactly what we have here. So I know that 3x minus y is equal to 12, which means 2 to the 3x minus y, is the same as 2 to the 12th, which is option A.
So this question says points A and B lie on a circle with radius 1. So I'm just going to just draw my circle, have a point A, have a point B, and a center, and call that a radius of 1. Okay. And arc AB has length pi over 3. All right, so this arc right here, so this portion of the circle is pi over 3. What fraction of the circumference of the circle is the length of arc AB? Okay, so that seems pretty straightforward, right? So initially we use plug-in picture, right? Because I'm drawing this based upon what's been provided. But now I'm going to just translate what I'm reading here, which essentially is saying, hey, if you have pi over 3, well, what fraction of that is it, what fraction of the circumference is that pi over 3? Right, so I want to actually just divide those things or create the fraction. So I can see, well, what's my x value here? What is it that I get out of finding the fraction of the entire circumference represented by this arc length of pi over 3? So this is a complex fraction, right? We have 2 fraction bars. So anytime I see that, I like to just separate them. So I'll say pi over 3, and then I'll use this division symbol, right? Divided by, and then my 2 pi r. Again, we know that r is 1, so let's just get rid of that, right? So really, that's just going to be 2 pi. So now, whenever you're dividing fractions, and of course I can call that 2 pi over 1, we can say, well, the first fraction stays the same. The division turns into multiplication, and the 2 pi over 1 turns into 1 over 2 pi. My pi's will cancel out, and what I'm left with is 1 over 6. So therefore, that is my answer. 1/6 is the fraction of the circumference of the circle that's represented by the arc length AB. So this question starts off by giving us this expression, 8 minus I divided by 3 minus 2I, where I just means imaginary. So let's see what the question says to see how we need to use this expression in order to find the answer. So the question says, if the expression above is rewritten in the form A plus BI, where A and B are real numbers, what is the value of A? All right, so let's see. A plus BI. Now we started off with 8 minus I over 3 minus 2I, but somehow we want this whole thing here to be written as a in the form of A plus BI. So not a fraction, right? So starting out as a fraction, but we want it, again, the question says rewritten in the form A plus BI. So what can I do with this fraction here to simplify it? So if you recall, we don't like to have imaginary numbers in the denominator. So what I'm going to do is multiply by the conjugate, which hopefully sounds familiar to you, and is really just the denominator with the sign flipped out in the middle. So instead of minus 2i, I have plus 2i. So for the top, I'm going to FOIL 8 minus I times 3 plus 2i. So first times first gives me 24. Outer times outer gives me 16i. Inner times inner gives me minus 3i. And last times last gives me minus 2i squared. And on the bottom, when I do the exact same thing, I end up with, again, first time first is 9. 3 times that is plus 6i. Negative 2i times 3 is minus 6i. Negative 2i times 2i is negative 4i squared. So to continue to simplify this, I'd have 24 plus 13i, right? Because 16i minus 3i. And then 2i squared. I squared, and we kind of have that note here. If I is equal to square root negative 1, that means that I squared is equal to square root negative 1 squared. So I squared is equal to negative 1 because the square here crosses out the square root. So that means that I'd have 24 plus 13i and then minus 2 times -1 all over. These two things cross out, positive 6i minus 6i. And again, I have another I squared here. So I'd have 9 minus 4 times -1. So continuing to simplify this way, just for space, I'd have 24 plus 13i plus 2, which is the same as 26 plus 13i. And on the bottom, I'd have 9 plus 4, which is the same as 13. Then I can simplify this, right? So I can reduce this fraction because 13 goes into 26 and it goes into 13. So 13 goes into itself 1 time. 13 goes into 26 2 times. 13 goes into this 13 1 time. So what I'm left with is 2 plus basically 1i. And that is in the format of a plus bi, in which case a equals 2 and b equals 1. The question here is asking me what is the value of a. So, right, so we have a's value is 2. So therefore the correct answer is choice A. So this question says, in triangle ABC, the measure of angle B is 90 degrees. So I'm going to just start off by drawing that right triangle, labeling it, which is in essence the first steps to the strategy plug-in picture. Okay, so then we were also told that BC is 16, right? So labeling, again, is part of our plug-in picture strategy. We want to draw, we want to label, right? So AC is 20. I'm going to just fill this in now because, usually the answer is not found in the given information. It's found in what you can find from the given information. So I'm just do that up front. So 16 and 20 there. This has to be a 12. Here's why. A lot of times on this test, a right triangle is going to be a 3, 4, 5 right triangle, especially if you're dealing with the side lengths. If you're dealing with angles, they may not care about side length, so it may not be 3, 4, 5. But anytime I see numbers around a right triangle, I always test them first to see if it's 3, 4, 5. And in this case, it is, right? If I just multiply each of these guys by 4, I end up with 12, 16, 20, right? Exactly what I have, 12, 16, 20. So that means that AB is 12. So then let's keep going. It says triangle DEF is similar to triangle ABC, where vertices D, E, and F correspond to vertices A, B, and C respectively. So let me just draw that out. So I have this similar triangle, and it's DEF. So D is here, and then E is there, and then F is there. So that means E is where the right angle is. And we're told that each side of triangle DEF is 1/3 the length of the corresponding side. So 1/3 of 12, well, that's 4. 1/3 of 20, well, that's 20 over 3. And 1/3 of 16, well, that's 16 over 3. Never feel pressured to find a decimal or some other simplified version when you're doing fractions, especially on the non-calculator section. Nothing wrong with calling this 20/3 and 16/3, okay? Nothing wrong with keeping it as an improper fraction. So then the question goes on to say, what is the value of sine F? Okay, well, as soon as I see sine anything, I think about SOHCAHTOA, right? SOHCAH and TOA, where in this case, we just want to focus on the sine part, and that just means that the sine of whatever angle you're focused on, so let's call it X for now, the sine of X is equal to the opposite side of that angle divided by the hypotenuse of the right triangle. So if we're trying to find the sine of F, and I look here to angle F, then the opposite side of angle F is equal to 4, and divided by the hypotenuse in this right triangle is 20/3. So a lot of students get confused when they see this complex fraction here. So what I like to do is just to rewrite it in a more visually appealing way. And that's to say, well, I know that this comes from 4 and then divide it by 20/3. I'm going to just write it horizontally. So we'll say 4. In fact, I'll call it 4 over 1. And then divide it by, and then my 20/3. So now this looks a lot more like just dividing fractions, which we all learned probably in elementary school or middle school, where you do this like keep, change, flip idea. So I keep the first fraction the same. I change the division into multiplication, and I flip over the second fraction, right, or write the reciprocal. So 4 over 1 times 3 over 20, well, that's just going to be, I can multiply straight across. I know I can cross cancel here as well. So if you know how to do that, by all means, please do it. You get to the answer a little bit faster. But otherwise, if I multiply straight across, I end up with 12 over 20. I want to reduce this fraction. The greatest common factor between 12 and 20 is 4. So 4 goes into 12 3 times, and 4 goes into 20 5 times, and therefore the answer to this question is going to be 3/5. So this question is a diagram question. More specifically, it is a table question. We see the table here. So we see that this table has something to do with handedness. We're separating things by female and male here. We're given some total numbers, but no other data within the table itself. So the question says the incomplete table above summarizes the number of left-handed students and right-handed students by gender for the 8th grade students at Keisel Middle School. The next sentence, there are 5 times as many right-handed female students as there are left-handed female students. So I'm going to say I don't know how many left-handed female students I have. And I do know that there are 5 times, right? 5 times that X number of right-handed female students. And there are 9 times as many right-handed male students as there are left-handed male students. So once again, I don't know the number of male students. Can't call it X though, because then that means that it will be the same as female. So I'm going to call it Y. And I do know that there are 9 times Y for the right-handed male students. If there is a total of 18 left-handed students, so we see that in the total row there, and 122 right-handed students, which we also see here in the school, which of the following is closest to the probability, right? So probability, I'll just say prob, on this test will always represent what I want, like what am I looking for, over what am I choosing from. So let's figure out what they're asking us to find. Which of the following is closest to the probability that a right-handed student, right? So we're choosing from all the right-handed students. So I'll just say right hand. That a right-handed student selected at random is female. So what I want out of the right-handed students is a female right-hand student, which I'll just say RT. Okay, so how many female right-handed students are there? Well, it is 5x. So that's my numerator. How many right-handed students are there to choose from? It is 122. So there's my probability. The problem is I still have this x term, so I can't actually solve the probability yet. So the other thing that I notice about this table is that the data here can be written in equation form, right? I can say that x plus y is equal to 18. And I can also say that 5x plus 9y is equal to 122. So doing so allows me to use, to treat this as a system of equations, which is exactly what it is. And I can combine these two equations together in order to figure out what x is, right? Because I don't care about y, I just want x. So I'm going to multiply this top equation by -9. In fact, I'm going to change my mind on that. So instead of using the elimination method, I'm going to use substitution, right? So to use substitution, and because I only want to solve for x, I'm going to take this x plus y equals 18. I'm going to subtract x from both sides here, and I'm be left with y equals 18 minus x. I can then use that to substitute this y here for 18 minus x. And in doing so, I end up with an equation, 5x plus 9 times 18 minus x equals 122, right? So I end up with an equation that only has x values. So let's see. So I'm going to solve this equation now. So I have 5x. 9 times 18, I can use my calculator, and I see that that is equal to 162. 9 times negative x becomes minus 9x equals 122. Combining like terms here, 5x minus 9x is negative 4x. I'm going to also subtract 162 from both sides here. So I'm left with negative 4x equals 122 minus 162, which is negative 40. And dividing both sides by negative 4, I end up with x is equal to 10. Okay, now if x is equal to 10, I can take that 10 and plug it back in here, right? So now I know that there are 5 times 10 female right-handed students. So I'd have 50 divided by 122. I go back to my calculator, and I see that 50 divided by 122 is equal to 0.4. I get 0.98. But we're looking to find, the closest answer to that, right, which is closest to the probability. So always check that to make sure. So that would be 0.410. And the answer is therefore answer choice A. So this question has a lot of information up above. In order for us to answer numbers 37 and 38, it says if shoppers enter a store at an average rate of R shoppers per minute and each stays in the store for an average time of T minutes, the average number of shoppers in the store N at any one time is given by the formula N equals RT, right? So N equals RT, right? Where N is the number of shoppers, R is the rate, and T is the time, the average time. So the owner of Good Deals store estimates that during business hours, an average of 3 shoppers per minute enter the store and that each of them stays an average of 15 minutes. The store owner uses Little's law to estimate that there are 45 shoppers in the store at any time. So that makes sense as well, right? We're just multiplying the 3 shoppers per minute by the 15 minutes and we get 45. So question 37 says Little's law can be applied to any part of the store. Okay, so now we're not dealing with the entire store. We're dealing with just part of the store, such as a particular department or the checkout lines. The store owner determines that during business hours, approximately 84 shoppers per hour make a purchase. Okay, so 84 shoppers per hour. So that's interesting. So it sounds like an R value, but we learned up above that R is based upon shoppers per minute, right? So we're getting 84 shoppers per hour. So let's convert that to per minute. So I'm going to multiply that by a conversion factor between hours and minutes. So I know that 1 hour is equal to 60 minutes. I put 1 hour on top versus bottom because I want these to cross cancel. I want them to be diagonal. So then when I divide 84 by 60 in my calculator, I get that this is 1.4 shoppers per minute. So there's my R value. So then it says that they spend an average of 5 minutes in the checkout line. So there's my T value. So T is equal to 5 minutes. At any time during business hours, about how many shoppers on average are waiting in the checkout line to make a purchase at the Good Deal store? Oh, so this is very straightforward. I just use my N equals RT. I know that R is 1.4 and T is 5. So 1.4, we go to our calculator just so we're certain about our calculations. 1.4 times 5 is 7. So we would expect that there are 7 shoppers waiting at the checkout line to make a purchase at any given time. So that's our final answer. So this question is based upon the above information that was provided for questions 37 and 38. This information basically gave us Little's law, which is N equals RT, where N represents the number of shoppers in a store at any time, R represents the rate of shoppers per minute, and T represents the amount of time on average that the shopper stays in the store. So question 38 says the owner of the Good Deal store opens a new store across town. For the new store, the owner estimates that during business hours, an average of 90 shoppers per hour. So again, we have R equals 90. I'll just say, I'll spell it out, shoppers per hour. So we need to convert that to per minute because that's what the unit for R is. So again, 1 hour is 60 minutes. the hours cross out diagonally. So I go to my calculator and I figure out what 90 divided by 60 is, which is 1.5. So R is equal to 1.5 shoppers per minute. And then it goes on to say, and each of them stays an average of 12 minutes. So T equals 12 minutes. The average number of shoppers in the new store at any time is what percent less than what is the average number of shoppers in the store at any time? That'd be N equals R, which is 1.5, times T, which is 12. 1.5 times 12 is, sorry about that, 1.5 times 12, mistyped it in my calculator. N is equal to 18, so 18 for this new store. So the average number of shoppers in the new store, the 18, at any time is what percent less than the average number of shoppers in the original store at any time. So the original store, we were given that information as 45. So we're comparing 18 versus 45. So again, let me just make sure I have the wording correctly. What percent less than the average number of shoppers? All right, so basically, if 45 shoppers are at the old store at any time and 18 are at the new store at any time, then the difference there, right, so 45 minus 18 is 27. So 45 minus 27 equals 18. So I find this number because I'm looking for the percent less, right? So what is 27 out of 45 as a percentage? So when I divide 27 divided by 45, I get 60%. So equals 0.6, which is equal to 60%. Right, so it's a 60% decrease when I go from 45 down to 18. So the answer here should be 60, or for 60%. So this question says, in the xy plane, the point PR lies on the line with equation y equals x plus b, where b is a constant. So I'm going to write some of this stuff down. Okay, so we have an equation, y equals x plus b. We know that that's some line represented there. And we also know that the point P comma R is on that line. The question goes on to say the point with coordinates 2P, 5R lies on the line with the equation y equals 2x plus b. Okay, so we have another equation that is y equals 2x plus b. And we're told that there's a point on that line that is 2P comma 5R. If P does not equal 0, what is the value of R over P? Right, so we take all that and we want to find R over P. That's the question, right? So here's the information. That's the info. This is the actual question. So how do we put all this together? Well, first of all, we're given these equations that have variables y, x, and b. And then we're given these points that contain P and R. The question wants us to find something that has a relationship between P and R, right? The ratio of R to P, which means we're going to have to somehow get these into the equations here. Now let's keep in mind that the point P comma R is just telling you that the x value at that particular point is equal to P, and that the R value at that particular point is equal to Y. And the same thing here. The x value at this particular point on this particular line is equal to 2P, and the Y value is equal to 5R. So if I replace the x and y with its equivalent R and P, my Y equals x plus b turns into R equals P plus b, and my y equals 2x plus b turns into 5r equals 2 times 2p, right? Just replacing the x with 2p plus b. So now I write that again. I have r equals p plus b, and I have 5r equals 4p, right? Because 2 times 2p plus b. Okay, so now this looks like, a system of equations to me. I know that my answer, I just want to find r and p. So I need to get rid of the b's. I don't want b as a part of my solution. So what would happen if I just subtracted this entire second line here? Nothing wrong with doing that. It does have a purpose. The purpose would be that b minus b is now gone, and what I'm left with is now a relationship between these two equations that only involves r and p, right? So r minus 5r is negative 4r, and p minus 4p is negative 3p. So again, I'm still trying to figure out, well, what is r divided by p? So if I divide both sides here by negative 3p, what I end up with is negative 4 divided by negative 3 is 4/3, and then I still have r over p, right? And this would equal 1, because negative 3p over negative 3p is positive 1. Now, I don't want 4/3, or I don't want 4r over 3p. I want just r over p. So if I multiply now both sides by the reciprocal, right, by 3/4, now the 3's cross cancel, the 4's cross cancel, and I'm left with r over p is equal to 3/4, and therefore my correct answer here is choice B. So this question is a diagram question. We have this large picture here provided to us. Lots of things have been identified and labeled already. So let's just get straight into the question to see if there's anything that we need to continue to label this with, or just to further understand. So the question says a grain silo is built from 2 right circular cones, right? So we see a cone up here on top, and we see a cone down here on bottom, with internal measurements represented by the figure above. So we see the measurements. Looks like the height is 5 feet. Looks like the radius is also 5 feet for the cones. Of the following, which is closest to the volume of the grain silo in cubic feet? All right, well, we're looking for the volume. And we know that this grain silo has 2 right circular cones and a right circular cylinder. So how do you find the volume for a cone? Well, the volume for a cone is the formula V equals 1/3 pi r squared h. Right, so we know we have 2 of those, right? So cone 1 and cone 2 are the exact same measurement. So you know that we're going to eventually multiply this entire volume by 2. And then the volume for the cylinder, is V equals pi r squared h. And we only have 1 cylinder, obviously, so we'll just use that. So we're going to practically add these 2 volumes together in order to solve this question. So what do we know about the cone? Well, we know that, so again, I have my 1/3 pi. The radius of the cone is 5, so I'm going to just put parentheses 5 squared. And the height is also 5, so just times another 5. So let's simplify this. So, in fact, it's better to use our calculator, because I just looked at the answer choices and I see that pi isn't present in the answer choices, so we need to include it here. So I'm going to say 5 squared is 25, times 5 is 125, and 125 times pi is 392.7, but then I'm multiplying that by 1/3, so I'm going to just divide by 3 because it's the same thing. So what I get here is that's 130.89, but again, I have 2 cones, so I'll multiply that by 2. So the final here that I get is 261.8. And then for the cylinder, again, I have pi. The radius for the cylinder is the same as the radius for the cone, so that's going to be, again, another 5 squared. And then the height for the cylinder is actually 10. So in my calculator, 5 squared is 25. 25 times 10 is 250. 250 times pi is 785.4. I add those two together, 785.4 plus 261.8. And what I get is 1047.2, which is the exact answer as choice D. Okay, so then, how did I know these formulas? Well, I've memorized these. You don't have to. These are on the first page of your math section, right? The first page of the math test for the SAT contains formulas. And these formulas for the volume of a cylinder, for the volume of a cone, are both contained there. So if you're answering question 25 and did not know that, you could always flip back to that first page, write those formulas down, and then come back to answer the question. So this question says, if x is the average arithmetic mean of m and n, okay, well then I can translate that. So I'm going to treat this as a translate word problem question. So the question just told me that x is equal to the average of m and 9. I find the average by adding them together and dividing by 2. There's my translation for the first part. And it says y is the average of 2m and 15, so that means y is equal to 2m plus 15 divided by 2. And z is the average of 3m and 18, so 3m plus 18 divided by 2 equals z. What is the average of x, y, and z in terms of m? Okay, so a couple of things here. One, I could continue this question definitely using this translate word problem method. And let me just show you what that means, and then I'll show you the other strategy. So the question is asking for the average of x, y, and z. Well, I know how to find that, right? From a general sense, it's just x plus y plus z divided by 3, right? That's how you find averages. You add up the things you're being asked to average, and you divide by the number of things you have. So x plus y plus z equals 3. Because I already know what x, y, and z are in terms of 3m, or in terms of m, I'm sorry, I could just restate this in terms of m instead of in terms of x, y, and z. So instead of x plus y plus z, I would have m plus 9, right? That replaces the x. So m plus 9 over 2. Then I'd have 2m plus 15 over 2. That replaces my y. And I'd have 3m plus 18 over 2. That replaces my z. And all of that divided by 3. So if you simplify this, what you'll see is that all the fractions in the numerator have a common denominator of 2, which means I can just combine those fractions together. The numerators have like terms, right? m, 2m, 3m, 9, 15, 18. If I combine all of those three fractions together, given they have a common denominator, what I end up with is 6m plus 42 over 2 all over 3. This 2 here can simplify this top fraction, right? Because 2 goes into all of these things, leading me to 3m plus 21 over 3. And then 3 goes into both 3 and 21, so I can simplify or reduce this fraction further. And what I'm left with is m plus 7, which means the correct answer must be B. So that's one way to do it. The other strategy is one of my favorite strategies on this test, which is plug in your own number. Now, the plug in your own number strategy is something that can be used, or can mostly be used whenever there is a variable or multiple variables in the answer choices. Whenever I see variables in the answer choices, I'm thinking plug in my own number. So if it were me, I probably would have gone, the simplify route, because I think as I translate, it just becomes pretty logical and, one step leads to the next. But let's say you're not really comfortable with all the fractions and the complex fractions and all that, we can still answer this without doing all that. So plugging your own number, the way that we would do that is we'd say m is equal to, make up your own number. I'm going to say 2. I always use 2 if I can. So what does that mean? That means x, instead of m plus 9 over 2, is going to turn into 2 plus 9 over 2, which is 11 over 2. And for y, instead of 2m plus 15, is going to become 2 times 2, which is 4, plus 15, which is 19 over 2. And for z, instead of 3m plus 18, I'm going to have 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 18, which is equal to 24 over 2. When I simplify that, I get x equals 5.5, I get y equals 9.5, and I get z is equal to 12. So all that's left is to actually answer the question. So the question says, find the average of x, y, and z. So I'm going to do that by adding them all up. So 5.5 plus 9.5 plus 12. I'm going to divide all of that by 3. I throw this into my calculator. 5.5 plus 9.5 is 15, plus 12 is 27, so I end up with 27 divided by 3, which is 9. So there's my average. Okay, so that's the first step of plugging your own number. The next step is to say, okay, well, now when I put this m equals 2 into each answer choice, which one gets me a 9, right? The 9 that I know I should get as an average. So for choice A, m plus 6, right? 2 plus 6 does not equal 9. But for B, 2 plus 7 does equal 9, meaning that B is most likely the right answer. And as we check the rest of these, we would see that these don't equal 9. So we feel more confident, again, that choice B, this m plus 7, is the correct answer. So 2 methods, translate word problem. Really, this is always going to need to happen, right? We're going to need to translate this. Really, what the question is, do you go from there to plugging your own number in, or do you go from there to like continuing the logical steps of translating what everything means? So this question is a diagram question. We're provided this graph that's here. Just pay attention to the shape of the graph. There really aren't any specific points that we know as of right now. I do see this y-intercept there, which I don't know the value of yet. I also see this x-intercept here, which I also don't know the value of. So let's read the question. So it says the function, so I like to write down equations when I see them. So f of x is equal to x cubed minus x squared minus x minus 11 fourths is graphed in the xy plane above, right? So the shape of this graph is controlled by this function here. If k is a constant such that the equation f of x equals k has 3 real solutions. Okay, so real solutions. So what does that mean? Real solutions when it comes to graphs, and a lot of students don't know this, but real solutions when it comes to graphs literally just means x-intercepts. Right? Real solutions are y equals 0. Okay, so very literally, they are just x-intercepts. So right now, this graph only has 1 real solution, as is. But somehow we get this f of x equals k business, k being a constant. Which of the following could be the value of k? Okay, then we have all these options for k. So what's the connection between these two things? Well, they both say f of x. Anytime I see that, I think substitution, right? So I could rewrite this as x cubed minus x squared minus x minus 11 fourths is equal to k. And in doing so, I would want to subtract k from both sides to make it equal to 0. So x cubed minus x squared minus x minus 11 fourths minus k equals 0. And this would help me to find, again, the 3 real solutions, which are the x-intercepts, right? So we can use math. I can just go with plugging in answers, right? So it's a strategy I can use here, PIA, plug in answers, to see which one of those answer choices gets me a factored form of this polynomial that has 3 real solutions. Or, which I prefer because why did they give me this big graph in the first place if I'm not going to use it? Or I can think about it from a visual standpoint, which is the x-intercepts. So let's think about it visually. So this graph, I'm going to subtract k from the current y-intercept, so negative 11/4, which is here, right? So that's basically negative 2.75. If you throw negative 11/4 in your calculator, you'll see that that's negative 2.75. Somehow this negative k here is going to move the graph, right? And it can only move it up or down. It's going to shift the y-intercept to the point where this graph now has 3 x-intercepts, right? 3 real solutions. Well, how does that happen? Well, it can't shift it down, right? We can't go away from the x-axis, which means that answer choice A and B are automatically crossed out. B's crossed out because if k is 0, the graph doesn't change at all, right? And we already know it doesn't have 3 x-intercepts. If k equals 2, which is answer choice A, then that would be a negative 11/4 minus 2. That would be shifting it down, right? That makes it even more negative. It makes the y-intercept go down 2 units. So that can't be it. We need to go up. So I like choices C and D because at least they make they shift this up. So if I were to choose, so looking at choice C, it would shift the graph up 2 units. So this would be 1 unit, right? So from there to there. Another 1 unit from here to here. So if I move that up, I'd have, this would be like my new y-intercept, and it looks like it goes up just slightly to the left before going down. And then it goes down to the right, right? And then goes back up. So even that, I still only have the 1 x-intercept. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll use a different color now. For choice, so I don't like choice C, right? It's not shifting it up enough. Choice D shifts us up 3 units. So I go up another unit. So basically put me right here for my new y-intercept. That'd be my 3rd space up. And again, just like before, to the left, I go up a little bit and then down. So there gives me a x-intercept. And on the right, I go down quite a bit and then up. And there goes my 2nd and 3rd x-intercept. And therefore, I erased, I did too much. Therefore, D is the best answer here from a visual standpoint, right? From this x-intercept standpoint. Of course, you can do the math here. You can say, well, when I plug in D minus x, negative 11/4, so I just do the math here. Negative 11/4 minus 3 over 1. Well, I want to have a common denominator. So it becomes negative 11/4 minus 12/4. This is negative, so it becomes plus 12/4. And that becomes positive 1/4, so it becomes positive 1/4. So now my new y-intercept is at positive 1/4. And again, you can throw this into a graphing calculator. And you'll see that you get 3 x-intercepts. If not, we could factor this. I don't want to take the time to factor this because I think if you know how to do that, you most likely got this question right. This video is for people who missed this question. So if you do know how to factor from this stage and maybe there's something else that went on in the setup, by all means factor this and you'll see that you get 3 solutions. We do expect to get 3 solutions because this is the highest power here is 3. But I really like this idea of using the visual, right? Why else would they give us this graph? So think about that. Why else would this graph be here if it weren't for the point that seeing that by shifting it up by 3 units, we end up with 3 real solutions, right? 3 x-intercepts. We could really get there very quickly if we accept that fact. So this question looks like it's going to be a translate word problem question. We do have this equation provided here with Q, N, and V. So there might be another strategy that pops up here that may be useful, but for now, I'm going to just make sure I'm reading this very actively, not reading it from top to bottom, but making sure to stop at the end of each sentence to make sure I understood what I read and to definitely write down any quantitative information. So the question says, the dynamic pressure Q, okay, so we know Q is pressure, generated by a fluid moving with velocity v can be found using the formula above, where n is the constant density of the fluid. Okay, so we understand what each of these are. So n is density, v is velocity, and q is pressure. An aeronautical, in fact, let me just write that down. Q equals pressure, v equals velocity, and n equals density. Okay, an aeronautical engineer uses the formula to find the dynamic pressure of a fluid moving with velocity v and the same fluid moving with velocity 1.5 v. Okay, so we have two different fluids, right? So one, we just have v, but fluid two, we have 1.5 v. What is the ratio of the dynamic pressure of the faster fluid? So ratio on this test automatically means fraction. We're never going to use the colon form of ratio, right? So the ratio of the dynamic pressure of the faster fluid, so that means the numerator is the faster fluid, so that pressure would be 1/2 n, but instead of v, right, it's going to be 1.5 v squared. To the slower fluid, well, the slower fluid is going to be our regular pressure formula, so 1/2 n v squared. So that's all I'm doing here. So how do I simplify the numerator? Well, the 1/2 is still there, the n is still there, but 1.5 squared, well, that's 2.25 v squared, versus the bottom here, I just have, again, my 1/2 n v squared. And we can see here that when I do the ratio, or the fraction, 1/2 crosses out 1/2, n crosses out n, v squared crosses out v squared. So what I'm left with is 2.25. So the ratio is equal to 2.25, and that is your answer. So this question says, for a polynomial p of x, the value of p of 3 is -2. Just going to underline that. Which of the following must be true? That's also important. Anytime I see the words must be true on this test, that lets me know that there's probably multiple correct answers, but only one of them has to always work versus the others that may be just situational, right? So which of the following must be true about p of x? So what do we know? We know that p of 3 equals -2. And what does that mean? That means that when x equals 3, y equals -2. And this is a very important understanding, right? So this p of 3, p of x, f of x, g of x, any of those function notations that you see on this test, I like to just completely get rid of them in my mind and think of them as just y, right? So when the x part is 3, then the solution, or y, is equal to -2. But we don't actually know what p of x is. What is p of x? So we have this information about p of x, but we're not really sure what it is. So what I'm going to do here, especially since it has to be true, is I'm going to make up a p of x, right? So you might think that's weird, but just follow me a little bit here. You'll see why this makes the most sense for answering this question. So since I know that I need to get y equals 2 when x equals 3, I'm going to make up a p of x function. Let's say I have 2x squared plus 3x. Let's keep the numbers small. And then I'm going to leave this blank for right now because I'm going to put whatever number is necessary in order to make this statement true. So what do I know? I know that when x is 3, so 2 times 3 squared plus 3 times 3, simplifying that, I get 2 times 9 plus 9, because 3 times 3 is 9. I get 18 plus 9, which is 27, right? So what needs to go here so that I end up with -2? Well, that would be a -29. So I just made up a function that will actually work given the parameters of this question. So I'm going to say my p of x is equal to 2x squared plus 3x minus 29. And again, you can make up any function that you want. You could have definitely started out with just x squared, x cubed, really anything that you want. I would just say keep it as simple as possible. So now let's try the answer choices. X minus 5 is a factor. Well, is that true? If x minus 5 were a factor, that means that it will go into this 2x squared plus 3x minus 29 with no remainder. So let's try that out really fast. So if I'm doing long division here, this x goes into 2x squared 2x times. Then I multiply this back down. I get 2x squared minus 10x. Subtract, which makes that addition, which makes that gone, which gives me 13x minus 29. Again, x into 13x, well, that would be a plus 13 here. And then again, multiplying that back down here, make this 13x minus 65. And I can already tell without doing the math, whereas this crosses out, my 29, negative 29 plus 65 is not, does not cross out. So that means that choice A is not a good answer. So I'm going to just erase my work here and cross out A. X minus 2 is a factor, right? So you can see this is not the easiest thing to do. But again, if I weren't explaining this, I could probably get through this a bit faster. And we're not taking that much time if you think about it, right? So same exact process. I'll go a bit faster this time. So I'd have a 2x here and then a 2x squared minus 4x. This is minus, this is plus. This becomes 7x and minus 29. And then I'd have plus 7, which case I'm going to end up with a plus 14 here. So, just to show you, so 7x plus 14, negative 7x plus 14. So that's not going to cross out either. So B is gone. Let's try x plus 2 into the same thing. 2x squared plus 3x minus 29. So same thing as 2x. 2x squared plus 4x minus and minus. So this becomes negative x minus 29, which makes this minus 1, which makes that negative x minus 2, but that becomes positive and positive. So once again, these numbers don't cross out, so C is gone. So I'm really hoping that choice D is the right answer. And of course, I would never suggest, unless your time is running out, I'd never suggest you just choose something because you hope it's right. So we're going to actually work out choice D, and let's see what choice D says. So choice D says the remainder when P of x is divided by x minus 3 is negative 2. Let's try that out. X minus 3 into, again, my function that I created. Let's do the long division on it. So this would be 2x, making this 2x squared minus 6x. Then I subtract, making that negative, making that positive, making this 9x minus 29, making this plus 9 up top, making this 9x minus 27. But then I subtract and I add. And what do I have left? A negative 2, which is what I was hoping, making choice D the right answer. So a little bit longer of a video than I typically like, but like I said, it didn't really take that long. If you were doing this on your own, it didn't have to explain each step to anyone. You just kind of blazed right through it. The most important things here is, first of all, knowing how to do the long division. So that was important. So if you haven't done it in a while, hopefully this served as a little bit of review for you. The second thing, right, and this is probably the most, doing the long division is pretty important because even if you have the function, even if you figured out the function, it would be difficult to try out each of these answers. But creating this function is pretty important as well, right? So just keep in mind, just for an example, since I have you here for a long time, I'll create another function that also works. So I can say P of x equals, let's call it x cubed minus, let's make it easy, minus x, right? Blank. And again, I just want this to all equal negative 2 in the end. If I plug in 3 for x, so I'd have 3 cubed minus 3. 3 cubed is 27, so 27 minus 3, which is equal to 24. If I want a negative 2, that means I'd have to subtract 26. And there you go. Here's another function for P of x that also works given the provided information, which I would promise you also would lead you to choice D as the correct answer.